This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Dr. Eric Russell about the concept of healing. Healing of self, healing of others, healing of organizations, and healing of societies, particularly within the current socio-political context.
Eric Russell, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you back. I like these weekly discussions that we're starting to have. This is the second installment, and we intend to do this every week, or at least most weeks going into the future. For those of you who didn't join us last week, Eric Russell is an HCI research associate. He's also an associate professor of emergency services at Utah Valley University. Eric and I go way back. We're good friends, and we've been colleagues for a long time. And we're both advocates for servant leadership. And as we go through these discussions each week, we're going to talk about different elements. So with that, Eric, why don't you launch us into our discussion for today?
Awesome. Well, when I was brainstorming where we need to be and looking at the world in its current state, I think the characteristic we need to discuss today is healing. And Larry Spears identified healing as one of the 10 characteristics of the servant leader from Greenleaf's work. And we need to expound on it for our society. We need to talk about it for the individual, for the organization, for community, and for the leader, him or herself. Like, we all have wounds, and there are systemic problems that exist within society. We've never dealt with them, and people need to be healed from these things before they can move on. So this is going to be an exciting topic, and I think we can probably do some cool things with it.
Yeah, and the topic of healing, of course, connects to, it could be physical, it could be mental, it could be spiritual, emotional, right? There's these various forms of healing. I'll just put it out there right from the beginning that we're not therapists, we're not mental health professionals,
Mm-hmm.
we're not trying to be here, but we want to talk about the concept, and we want to share some thoughts and insights. And if anyone listening is in need of a mental health professional, we would certainly encourage you to seek out those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the wounds, that's the thing, physical wounds heal, but it's the mental wounds that last forever. That's the trauma. That's the PTSD. That's where you need to reach out for help.
Yeah. And you can't, you can't just wish it away, right? I have a good friend, on a personal level, talking about personal healing. I have a friend that has had issues with anxiety and depression. And a few years ago, it was pretty severe. But she comes from a pretty traditional household, very conservative household. They kind of think that, getting medication for that kind of thing or going to a therapist is hokey and new agey and not necessary. And so anyway, she was talking to her dad, and her dad basically said, he was super dismissive and said, you should just go to Home Depot, buy some materials, build a bridge, and get over it. Right. And that's not helpful.
No.
So especially someone who's like in the middle of intense bouts of anxiety and depression. You can't just get over it, right? And you mentioned PTSD. You can't just get over that. There are mental exercises. There are ways of framing our thinking. There are things that we can do that a therapist can help you work. They can help give you those tools to work through. But it doesn't just magically happen, and you can't just will yourself out of those types of traumas.
No, you can't just pray the pain away. It's a cop out. It's a very easy statement that people like to say to kind of get out of that discussion, because it's not an easy discussion to have with people. In the world that I come from, it's a difficult discussion. It's different because people think they're going to lose their career, they're going to be judged, or you're not tough, you're not an alpha. And the thing is I don't care how big and how strong you are, the human soul and spirit, depending on what you believe in, is the same size. And that gets damaged, and our mental health gets damaged. It just does. And until you deal with those traumas, you can never be healthy and move forward. But it's funny, if somebody gets into a car accident and they break their back, we have all the sympathy in the world and we have all the medicine in the world. But if somebody actually gets hit by a car, they heal, but they're having these problems now walking down the street. They're having that PTSD. They're having that flashback. Our answer is well, get over it. Well, that secondary experience that we talk about, reliving it over and over again in your mind, they have to be able to deal with that. You need healing for that too. When you go through traumas, when you look at the number of people who have been abused as children, okay, sexually, physically, emotionally, there's a lot of damage out there for people. And if people were open about those things, like I'm one of the lucky ones that doesn't have that stuff, you could say it's privilege, right? But you have to help them fix that. Because how do you get the best out of your people if they're carrying such a pain and that needs to be healed? And how do you think you're going to get the best out of yourself without healing that? And it's okay to not be okay, Yeah,
absolutely. And you started to frame it in terms of organizations, and we want to talk about individuals, we want to talk about teams, organizations, even society as a whole, how we go through this healing. Anything more you want to say about framing it in terms of Greenleaf's philosophy and servant leadership?
So the whole idea of servant leadership, when he brought it forth, remember he talked about the toxic organization, the toxic bureaucracy, the toxic problems. Well, the whole idea of servant leadership was to heal that. Like that's what the philosophy is trying to do. It's trying to heal these, not just wounds, but these ongoing wounds that are continuously caused by these organizations. And so that's really how you want to look at servant leadership. Servant leadership is a way to heal this. I'll let you pick which one you want to start with, be it organizations, be it individuals, and we can talk about whatever. But that's really at the heart of what Greenleaf was talking about with servant leadership, was trying to heal this toxicity that exists.
Yeah, and I think let's start with organizations, but framing it within how organizations can both heal as organizations, but how leaders within organizations can help their people heal. And that's something that you just referred to. And again, to a certain extent, when there's trauma, when there's emotional anguish, anxiety, stress, depression, some of those sorts of things, you really need to go see a therapist. There's just no other way around that. It's just a necessary thing, just like going to see the doctor and getting medicine, for your back injury or whatever, right? So we do need to destigmatize mental health and be able to have honest discussions about that, both within our homes, but also within the workplace. It's an incredibly private thing, and so within the workplace, you have to be very careful about that. You obviously can't be sharing someone else's condition. One of the people that work for you, you can't be sharing their condition with other people. But you can look for ways to be supportive and accommodating to people who have experienced trauma. And I've seen examples where organizations and particular leaders have been exceptionally good at that. And I've seen situations where they're exceptionally bad. And unfortunately, the exceptionally bad ones, or trending that way on the spectrum, tend to be more common. Because at least in US culture, again, there's a stigma behind mental health issues. And we kind of have this idea that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps, be tough, show up to work. Most employers, they're at-will employers, so they can get rid of you at any time. So if someone's struggling, the inclination of a lot of employers is, I don't want to deal with this crap. They're late. They're they have an attitude. They're struggling with customers, whatever. It's a performance issue. We're just going to get rid of that person. And that's a common approach in how leaders will take it. And I understand that. I understand why they would do that. But then I've been so amazed when I've seen the opposite happen, where I've seen a leader who observes that kind of behavior. And especially if they observe it in someone who's already had a good track record with the organization, someone who's a valued employee, someone who's done great work for them. And then there's like a downward trend. And I'm thinking of one particular leader where their approach was anything but, what's the word I'm trying to think of? They weren't trying to discipline their employee. Rather, they went to them. They recognized, hey, you're struggling with something. What can I do to help you? They searched for ways to be supportive. They searched for ways to be accommodating. And they helped that individual get the help they need and then fulfill their potential again, right? And that's what I would love to see happen more within organizations, and that we wouldn't be so quick to push people to the side or to the curb.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Well, let's look at it. Let's look at it from an economic standpoint. All right, you have somebody who works for your organization. Let's say they've been with you for 8 years. Think of the amount of money and time that you've spent getting them to where they're at. And think about, especially like you said, they've always been a good follower. They've always been a good employee. To just dismiss that person and get rid of them or push them aside and just let them break, it's going to end up costing you more money. You don't benefit by losing your talent. You actually end up costing your organization more money. So when we look at one of the biggest ways that I measure organizations when I work with them is I want to see their retention rates, right? I want to see how many people are still there. And so if we just treat people as throwaway products, especially when somebody's having just a bad time, like you think about it, what if you have an employee who lost a child? Like, you seriously think that individual is going to be okay in a few weeks? You think they can just pull them up by their bootstraps? They just went through hell. They just went through the one thing that we say nobody should have to go through, which is bury your own kid. All right. What if they're going through a divorce? What if they find out that their spouse has a terminal disease? We're very quick to use that "you're only as good as your last act" kind of a thing. And I think that mentality causes us to just throw people away instead of helping them heal. Now, that doesn't mean that some people they go too far, like you can't get them back. And that's one of the skepticisms associated with servant leadership, is that whole idea of, well, you just have to have infinite patience. Well, no, the whole idea of patience is it comes to an end. But I think as a leader, if you're a leader worth their salt, I think you have to work to try to help heal the wounds of your people. And that goes to what we talked about before, as far as listening is concerned, hearing the things that aren't being said. You know your people. You can tell something's wrong. Approach them humanely. And we'll talk about society and what we see in policing and what we see out there on the streets. And that's one of the worst things that I think has happened, is we forgot to see each other as people.
Yeah. And before we move on, maybe I'll just say a couple more things about that. You mentioned retention, which is a very important metric, and the cost of people leaving is not trivial. And so just treating employees like cogs in a machine, and you can just replace the cog, I mean, that's incredibly naive of a leader to think that. It's hard to get good people into the right positions doing good.
Oh yeah.
And it's expensive. It takes a lot of time. So if you have a good person that's going through something, help that person. And ultimately, from an economic standpoint, it's in your benefit to do that, like you just mentioned. And when we think of retention, a lot of times we think about people choosing to leave. Like, we want to keep the good people from choosing to leave. But it's also, there's involuntary and there's voluntary turnover. The voluntary turnover gets a lot of the focus. Involuntary turnover, that's where people get fired. That also is just as costly for organizations. And because a lot of employers, use this employment at will philosophy, and they just say, your latest behavior, your latest performance hasn't been up to par, so you're gone. That's also not a trivial expense to the organization, especially if you consider if they were to just invest a little bit of compassion, patience, and support into that person who was once a good performer, to help them get back to being a good performer. You can avoid firing that person and getting them back into a condition where they're able to be, their whole self and part of the team again. But it doesn't happen magically. It requires a people-centered focus, and it requires compassion and empathy. And unfortunately, those aren't characteristics that all leaders, have. And that's why servant leadership is a powerful philosophy and approach, because it really espouses, trying to do that. Before we move into society and talking about policing a little bit, I also just want to talk for a minute about organizational health, like organizational healing. Because organizations as institutions, as systems themselves, they do harm sometimes. They have bad policies that hurt people. They have products that hurt people. They hurt the environment, whatever. Organizations need to heal as well. And not just from a PR standpoint. It's not just about saving face with the community so that people will come back and start buying your products again. It's about actually being a healthy company, a healthy culture where people want to work for you. You can attract and retain good people. You can drive customer loyalty. All those things are byproducts of it. But it's not just about that. It's about healing as an organization, acknowledging your faults, your missteps, your mistakes, apologizing for those mistakes, and moving on. And until apologies are made, until you actually acknowledge the pain that you caused as an institution, then you can't heal. And unfortunately, we see examples. I'm not going to name any specific organizations, but I have a few on the top of my head that they're trying to do good things. I know that they're trying to put their best foot forward. They want to leave the past in the past. I get that, but sometimes you just need to acknowledge the pain. You need to apologize for the hurt you caused, and that only then are you able to step forward into healing. And you just can't sidestep that step.
Yeah, and it's dripping in ego. I call it. I actually write about it. I call it it's the new sheriff in town kind of a thing. You take over an organization, especially if you're coming from the outside, and you just think all of the problems are going to go away because now you're in charge. And if it's been a toxic organization that's done horrible things, if it's ruined people's lives, like imagine if you were a mid-level employee at Enron, like you're responsible for ruining people's lives. People killed themselves after they lost their jobs and their pensions and everything. You're a part of that. And an organization that has that toxicity that exists in it, it's like you put, I don't know, it's like putting sugar in a gas tank. You've got to clean all of that. You have to take the whole thing apart. You have to wash it out. You have to clean out the fuel injector. You got to do everything. And then that can run again. But if you haven't fixed that problem within that organization is still sitting in a level of toxicity. And again, from an organizational leadership standpoint, it is a direct benefit to you to fix this. Usain Bolt is the greatest sprinter of all time, but if he has a problem with his hamstring, he can't run. He has to be healed. He can't be the greatest if he has that kind of an injury. And if you make him run with that injury, it's just going to exacerbate it. It's going to make it worse, and he might never run again. And I like to use him as an example because he's like one of the most perfect athletes that's ever lived. But that's how an organization is when you have these problems within organizations and they've existed over and over again. Maybe it's an organization that's had that cronyism. Maybe it's had that baboon management style. Who knows? But so many problems. And when you listen to people and they're constantly bringing up the past, you know that there's problems that exist that have never been healed within that organization because they've never been addressed. And so that new person takes that leadership role and they just pretend that they're there, and it's just dripping in ego. And there is a tangible benefit to them to fix that problem and to heal that organization because people are carrying those wounds. They have that injured hamstring.
And it's the difference between long-term versus short-term orientation and a sustainability mindset, right? Yeah. Because certainly there's pain in the short term. When you acknowledge those problems and you make the apologies and you try to address trauma head on as an organization, there's short-term pain. And there's going to be short-term ramifications in terms of dips in productivity and those sorts of outcomes. But if you take a long-term perspective, a sustainability perspective, there's only upside from seeking that healing. And the example of athletes is a really great one because you just don't magically return to gold medal stature after a major injury unless you do everything that needs to happen in order to heal whatever the injury was. You just can't pretend. You can't just say tough it out. You can't just pretend like nothing happened. And unfortunately, I think because of the fear of the short-term pain, that too many leaders and too many organizations aren't willing to take that critical step.
That's well said. The other thing is I don't know, it's kind of a new phenomenon. It's like maybe the last 30 years in American business, maybe the last 20 years in American business is this, we just look to the next quarter. It's not, we want to build a sustainable business that grows and is phenomenal for centuries. These great companies that have been around for forever, It's like, well, what's the next quarter? I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where this mindset came from. Maybe you do. But I think they look at it the same way. They look at healing the same way. It's like, well, if we try to have the problems in the short term, even though we're going to be better in the long term, well, it's going to hurt our quarterly profit. It's going to hurt this. It's going to hurt that. Businesses used to not think that way, and they do now. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot driving that in terms of both, like if we think in the US, there's cultural drivers of that because it's not the same everywhere in the world. And so there's definitely some cultural differences. There's some legislative differences in the US that have happened over the last few decades that I think have contributed to that. And we have such a huge focus on shareholder interests, right, and stock prices, and like you said, quarterly earnings and the quarterly outlook, because that's what drives CEO and C-suite executive bonus structures and such. That all has emerged in the last few decades. The huge pay gap in terms of executive pay versus average pay of employees within organizations. That's like crazy wide now, and only gets wider and wider every year. So some of those types of things and kind of this hyper competitive approach, it drives efficiencies, it drives productivity, it drives, in many ways a strong economy. But there are unintended consequences, and there are negative consequences and harms to people when that approach is taken, and when you don't take the time to step back and to do the necessary hard work and painful work of helping people address the trauma and helping them to heal. And you said it perfectly. If I'm a CEO and I have this huge windfall bonus coming my way, but I need my quarterly earnings to look wonderful this year, in order to get that, am I going to be inclined to disrupt the system and to tip over the cart and to dismantle things and to clean it and to get it work in pristine order? Or am I inclined to just push through and just get people to keep going even though there's trauma that needs to be addressed? And most leaders push through because they're not willing to take the personal hit that would come to them in terms of their status, in terms of their pay, in terms of whatever. And then they rationalize it in terms of, well, I'm providing value to the shareholders. That frustrates me when I hear that, because, well, the best value to shareholders is long-term sustainable growth, long-term sustainable value for the organization.
Yeah.
That's the best value. And so it's not like an either or. You either address harm and trauma, address it, heal, and move forward in a positive way, or you force people to just push through so that you can maintain productivity. It's not an either or, and that's how it gets framed often, and it's harmful.
Yeah, it seems like we're doing that with everything in society. It's an either or. When you talk about that, I think about Wells Fargo. I would always say that Wells Fargo is it's always been the gold standard, right? Like the gold standard of banking. And the things that happened at Wells Fargo over the last six years, that really hurt the bank. It hurt their reputation. And you're talking about an old business now. You're not talking about some young startup that just went IPO. You're talking about an old business, a trustworthy business. When you think of secure, financing and things like that, you think of Wells Fargo, especially as a national bank, very well respected. And that tarnished their reputation, also tarnished the reputation of the people who work there. They're almost afraid to say it.
I have some family and friends who are executives in other banks, and they flat out told me if they have a person who applies to work at their bank and they worked for Wells Fargo previously, they at best look at them with incredible skepticism, but oftentimes they won't even consider them. And it's because of the toxicity that existed there, and it was systemic and it was top down.
Yeah,
It wasn't just some bad apples at the bottom level, right? It was systemic. It was top down. It caused all sorts of harms to the organization, to the people, to consumers. Great example. The Enron example is another great example. These are toxic companies, and it doesn't need to be that way. So anyways, I think it is important to remember that we're talking about healing as individuals, as teams, as organizations. And organizations do need to do the work of healing. Okay, let's shift a little bit now and talk about society. And right now we're dealing with, the aftermath of the George Floyd horrific killing, the protests that are happening across the country, lots of public debates about policing. You're a emergency services professional and professor, first responder. What's your perspective on all of this, and how do we heal as a society? There's so much angst, so much pain, so much trauma, institutional and systemic racism. How do we heal from all of this?
It's deep.
Do you have all the answers, Eric?
God, I wish I did. I wish I could just snap my fingers. I really do, and make it better. But there's healing all around. Let me first take it from a law enforcement perspective. Right now, and for the last several years, it has been very difficult to recruit law enforcement. Fire and rescue is having problems. The military is having problems as well, but especially law enforcement. People just don't want to do the job. To be a cop, and I'm not talking about federal policing. This is local municipal policing. You really do see the worst of humanity over and over and over again. And fire rescue does too. Law enforcement, for some reason, it's just they're different roles. So people trust the fire department, they love firefighters, and they distrust the police. And so you basically put that uniform on and go out there and you do a job. And I just think that it eats at you day in and day out, and it wears you down. But that's not what happened in Minneapolis. Okay, that's not what happened there. As a matter of fact, I want to say that what happened in Minneapolis was even deeper than this. That cop had a history with George Floyd. They both worked at a nightclub together. That cop seemed to me to have that Napoleon syndrome, where he was small. George Floyd was a massive human being. He was a spectacle to be seen. He was 6'6", I want to say like 260, 270, completely yoked, just huge. And that cop in that moment used his position and the submission of a man who one-on-one could have crushed him in a one-on-one competition, to dominate him, to embarrass him, to cause him to urinate, and eventually he killed him. And he didn't do it, I don't think, just because George Floyd was black. He did it because he was intimidated by George Floyd, because he could never be a man of that size and stature. And when he finally was able to get him wrapped up and handcuffed and a couple of other guys kneeling on him, he put his knee on his neck. And I don't want to say that that guy is the problem in policing. I think that stands out as just absolute, utter cruelty. It is an abuse of power. It is somebody who should have never been a police officer in the first place. So I want to kind of set that aside when we're talking about policing. But the way that our system is set up with law enforcement in our society, we pit our cops against people, whether we like it or not. That's what we do. We put them out there against people. And even the cops know it. Most police officers want reform. I'll tell you that right now. As somebody whose best friends are cops, as somebody who's worked hand in hand with cops, on somebody who's trained SWAT, all this kind of stuff, I am here to tell you right now, most police officers want reform because you can't keep doing this. They don't want to go out there and do this either. And the vast majority of police officers were not the kids that did their lockers in high school that get that badge and that gun to go out there and bully people. That's not a lot of cops. But when you constantly put somebody out in society and stage them against somebody else, i.e. the police officer and the citizen, this is going to happen. It's just that way. And then you put them in riot gear and you give them, 80, 90 degree temperatures, and people are shouting at each other and things are being thrown at them and they're angry too. And they don't even want to be there either. It's just, people are going to snap, and it's horrible. It really is horrible. And that goes to the fact that we can't give the jobs away right now. And if you want to go a little deeper with this, just look at corrections. 75% of people that go into corrections as a corrections officer self-remove from the profession in the first 60 months. You want to talk about a retention problem and a cost. You have states that have hundreds of vacancies. And it's just because of what the job is. Most police officers, and when I say most, I mean most, will stand between you and the thing that goes bump in the night. And they will take a bullet for you, like we saw up in Ogden the other day in Utah here, where that police officer was shot. He was 24 years old, responding to a domestic violence dispute, and he was killed. That's most cops. But the culture of policing and the way the system is set up, the lack, and I've researched this, we have peer-reviewed publications on this stuff, the lack of civilian oversight, the way that we train police officers and what we expect of them. When we deinstitutionalized mental health in the United States, we made our cops, our social workers, our psychologists, our drug counselors, that's not what they're trained for. When you look at the standard police officers standard in testing, when you look at that stuff, and even when you look at a standard criminal justice degree, which is the degree that most police get, either an associate's or a bachelor's degree, it's lacking in that stuff. But yet we expect them to go out there and be the social workers. And then on top of that, most people that they deal with in society, maybe like a traffic stop and stuff, even they're good people. But because you deal with violent people in that mix, you deal with somebody that was maybe a strong arm robber, you deal with somebody that just, was an attempted murder or a murder, or somebody that has a gun on them that's running from you and all this kind of stuff, or maybe you're in a shootout, that puts them on tilt. So now they're on point. So no matter who they're interacting with, once you get that in there, once you beat that dog over and over again, that dog is going to wince every time you pet it, and that cop is going to be on point every time they deal with people. And policing has changed because of this. And that doesn't mean that there isn't serious issues in policing. That doesn't mean that there isn't embedded racism. And even the cops know this. When you look at the war on drugs, okay, there is such systemic racism in just the war on drugs alone. You seriously think somebody goes to the academy to become a law enforcement officer to bust somebody for a $10 bag of weed? But then you look at the arrests, and they're arresting far more persons of color than they are white people for the exact same crime. And when they go to the justice system and they go through the court system, the sentences are different too. And so that brings us to the other side. One of my favorite things that I ever heard on the subject was Van Jones said, "What do I have to do? Dress my son up in a tuxedo so he can walk down the street." And it was right after Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. Okay. And George Zimmerman denied orders to stand down. And Trayvon Martin, as far as I was concerned, was protecting himself. He was a kid. Okay. And he did exactly what I would do. If you follow me and my wife around a few blocks, I'm going to come at you too. And so when you look at the way that especially Black youth are viewed, where something as stupid as wearing a hoodie. But again, it goes deeper. You're enculturated. Look at how the media portrays it. Look at how Hollywood portrays it. Look at how they portray kids on the streets. So you'll see somebody walking down the street with a hoodie on, and you're all of a sudden thinking that they're some type of a gang member, and they could be a tech superstar. They could be a kid that's in law school. They could just be coming from the gym. But again, it's that programming. It's that experience. You're watching it. And so we take these two things and we pit these people together out there in the streets. We pit working class cops against poor and working class people over and over and over again. And then they experience violence, they deal with each other. They experience violence, they deal with each other. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So, as and we could go on and on to talk about the problems, the struggles. It's incredibly complex. And I don't want anyone listening to, get the impression that we think there's some sort of simple solution to this, because that's not what we think at all. It's incredibly complex, but what is clear to me is right now we're like at a tipping point, it seems, in the US, and there is incredible trauma, incredible pain, and it needs to be addressed. There needs to be reform. What exactly that needs to look like, that's up for discussion and debate. And there's going to be honest differences of opinion on that. But I don't think many people think there isn't a need for reform. Reform needs to happen. There's no doubt there's clear evidence of disproportional targeting of people of color, and systemic racism, not just in policing, but in many different aspects of society. That's a problem. And how do we heal from that? There's no way to start the healing unless we can acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the trauma, recognize it in ourselves, recognize it in our institutions, apologize for it, and start to have the difficult conversations that have to occur in a sustained way to make course corrections. And that will allow us to heal over time. There's no quick fix. There's no easy answer to this. We can't just pass a law, in Congress next week and all of a sudden everything's going to be fine. This pain has been centuries in the making, and in part where we're at today, I think, is a result of us trying to do just like we were talking about with organizations, is that as a society, it seems like a lot of what we've done is just try to say, well, that's in our past. Slavery, Jim Crow, all that, all the civil rights movement, that's in the past. It was horrible. We're horrified by it, but that's not how things are today. It's in the past, and we just kind of try to sweep it aside, sweep it under the rug. What we're seeing, though, is it's not in the past. It might seem that way for someone like me. I have all sorts of privilege, and so I may not encounter it all the time. But for people of color who experience it day in and day out, they know it's not in the past. They know that there's still the trauma that's just there right under the surface, or perhaps right in plain sight. But it's in their neighborhoods, in their communities. Until we can address past problems and truly rectify them, I don't see a path forward in a healthy way. And that's going to, politically, that's going to be an incredibly difficult thing to do, because we're more divided than we've ever been, in terms of political ideologies. And I don't know, the pain and the wedge that's in this country right now, it's hard to see, and I'm not sure what the answer is. But we need to have more good faith dialogue. We need to have people coming to the table willing to have the hard conversations, to look critically at themselves, recognize what they need to do to be better, what their families can do to be better, and then we can start to build out from there.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't see a lot of the problems that exist today, the problems that the African American community needs to solve. I think a lot of the problems is we need to start recognize the problems that exist. Again, you mentioned privilege, and it's true. I mean, look at the Tulsa massacres. I mean, let's just let's just take it for what it is. And let's go back for a second to the war on drugs and watched what that did to African American communities where that wasn't a problem. It really wasn't an issue, but it just exacerbated problems and what were built up. You have to go through history to see there were phenomenal businesses built by African Americans. There was these great communities and that would burn to the ground, or they were pushed out. And it's hard because I believe that privilege is far more socioeconomic than it is pigment. But we have to acknowledge that there's a responsibility on our part to go, no. It's different when a black man walks into a bank to get a bank loan. It's different than when I walk in to get a bank loan. I don't ever have to check myself when I walk into a room. I never acknowledge myself when I walk into a room, but they're very well aware of it. And I say that because I have far too many friends that have told me that, and I've experienced with them when we've been out. I don't care where you're at in the political spectrum, and I don't care whether or not you're a Black Lives Matter advocate or you're a law enforcement officer. This stuff has to be fixed because you can't keep going forward with this. It just doesn't work anymore. There's got to come a time where people just say, you know what? I don't care how I feel about it politically. I need to just work on it to fix it. And that article that I just had come out, that green soup leadership, that's really what it's about. I don't care what you call it. You just have to give people what's good for them. And what's good for them is a society that is on equal footing. And nobody's asking for equality of outcome. That is a very, very rare thing to hear people ask that. They're just asking for equality. And if you're poor, and this is one of the reasons why it needs to go just beyond being African American or being Latino. If you're poor, you have no justice, you have no voice, and you have no say. And you're seeing it right now in our own economy. The stock market is at record high, but we have all this unemployment. Why? Because most of the people who have lost their jobs are on the lowest rungs of the socioeconomic ladder. Like, if you don't need to look any further than that to see that there is a problem in our society. There is a problem with race, but there is also this massive socioeconomic problem. And I'm like you, I don't pretend to even remotely have the answers. But I also know that it's not the responsibility of people who are being discriminated against to fix the problem.
No, not at all. We need to show solidarity towards people who are in those situations, being discriminated against, being abused, disproportionately targeted. We need to have those difficult discussions. And it's painful, it's hard, and there's no easy answers. If there was, we would have solved it a long time ago. Because most people are good, I believe. Most people want to be fair. Yeah. Most people want to be fair. Mm-hmm. Most people are regardless of where people are at on the political spectrum, most people are horrified by what happened. What has been happening over the last couple of weeks, and it's been profiled in the media the last few years. So let's take this opportunity to start having these conversations, these discussions, approach them in good faith, even when we're sitting next to someone who might politically disagree with us. And let's start to look for ways that we can drive solutions through political reforms, through social reforms, whatever the case may be. And as we finish off today, we're about out of time, but as we finish off today, again, just coming back to where we started, it starts with the individual and individual health, individual healing. Organizations and institutions need to be thinking about institutional and organizational health and healing. And society as a whole, we each play a role in trying to drive societal health. And it's my hope that leaders within organizations will recognize their role in healing of their people and in driving healthy institutions, and be willing to be humble enough to acknowledge the pain that has been caused, whether it was intentional or unintentional, to apologize, to step forward, and to make things right. I'll give you the last word.
It's for the good of everybody that you help people heal and that you heal yourself as well. You don't want to live in a society where we keep pushing each other away. I always ask people to really consider what somebody is saying when they're either trying to sell you something or to get you to vote for them. Like, you bring up politics. I seriously believe that politics are a part of the problem. They have caused tribes. They have done undue harm to relationships with people. And we're all in it together, whether we like it or not. The world is hard enough to deal with, and life is hard enough to deal with. And to watch each other treat one another like this, I mean, what good is going to come out of it? And if you put it in an economic frame, let's do economics. It is in everybody's economic benefit to have better organizations, healthier organizations, to heal wounds, and to have healthy communities for everybody.
Well said. Amen. It's been a wonderful discussion with you today, Eric. I hope that everyone will seek healing, and both for yourselves, your families, your organizations. I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. And I look forward to doing this with you again next week, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week. Check out our new weekly LinkedIn newsletter, Alchemizing Human Capital, exploring industry trends via original research and interviews with executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We look forward to having you join us.